We started throwing parties at the warehouse and charging entry. There was one party we had, T-Pain showed up. The parties, the reason we did them the way we did, we would get the marketing value from it, and then we would also, since we were charging entry, we would also be making money. So then we would turn around and with that marketing value, we'd take that money and go make productions and then sell it to the people we were just marketing to.
Welcome to the Grit.org podcast with Colby Harris and Brian Harbin. In these episodes, they speak to top achievers in athletics and business to understand the habits and mindset they apply in order to build more grit.
I can! I will! I'm going to! All right, welcome back to the Grit.org podcast. My name's Colby Harris. Alongside me is Brian Harbin, and we're here with today's guest, Jerry Rodriguez. Jerry, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no worries.
Absolutely. So Jerry's a serial entrepreneur local to Jacksonville, Florida. He's ran multiple companies now and is starting to invest a lot of his focus into real estate while also running MFG, which is his new brand / manufacturing company that we'll talk a little bit more about today. But starting out at the beginning of your story, Jerry, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you ended up in Jacksonville. I actually read a crazy story that you guys moved here after the San Francisco earthquake. So tell us a little bit more about that and kind of, what led to you moving to Jacksonville.
Yeah, so I was born in San Jose, California, which is right outside San Francisco. And in 1989, there was an earthquake during the World Series, and the bridge collapsed on itself, and it was like a double-decker bridge. And my dad had just gotten off that bridge, like not long after or before that had collapsed. So my parents were like, "We're moving to the other side of the country." They were super scared. And I was a little less than 5 at that time, so or a little younger than 5. And then my parents were looking all over Florida, so they went to Miami, Orlando, Tallahassee, Tampa, Jacksonville. And then the reason my parents chose Jacksonville was because of the amount of churches they had. So they decided to choose Jacksonville, and like they felt like they were super welcome coming from California, so they decided to stay.
Yeah, cool, man. And definitely, no earthquakes around here, but still got hurricanes, a whole bunch of other nonsense.
And the hurricanes are, honestly, every single year, I can't wait for hurricane season to finish, just because then I know I don't have to worry about like flooding or wind damage or like anything crazy happen to any properties, because it's a little stressful sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. You guys are right there on the river too. I don't know what, how many feet from the river to
your
living room, but
to the door, I want to say it's like 9 or 10 feet from high tide. Yeah. So we're all right. But if it comes up super high, then it could.
Yeah, like what happened in Fort Myers earlier this month. I don't know if you remember back in October or November. They had 15-foot storm surge, which, just hoping we don't have to see any of that soon.
Right. Yeah, I would not.
And so growing up in Jacksonville, you were big into swimming and wrestling. Any insight into how you got involved in that and any takeaways or life lessons you learned during that period?
Yeah, so grew up in Jacksonville, went to... for elementary school, went to Southside States Elementary, and then went to the magnet program. So went to Darnell Cookman for middle school, and then Stanton for high school. And when I was, I want to say like 15 or 16, I decided to join the American Red Cross Volunteer Lifesaving Corps. So Jack's Beach lifeguards. And but you got to go through the training as a volunteer lifesaving lifeguard. And so that's when I really hit it hard in swimming at school, in high school, and then also there. And then I feel like that's when I kind of became super active and super in tune with fitness, because like every morning you were having to run, swim, do workouts. So, and then wrestling, just a lot of my buddies wrestled in high school. So it was just another thing I could do with them and hang out. And in middle school, I played football, and then I played some Pop Warner in early middle school, but really didn't continue down that path. So
yeah, so like you said, you were working as a lifeguard, not necessarily like running a business already or anything like that. What did you feel like you, or did you have an idea of what you wanted to do after high school? Like, did you know you wanted to run businesses, or did you have some direction you wanted once you left Stanton?
So in high school, my dream was to tour in a band as a drummer.
Do you have a band?
Yeah. So I played in bands through middle school, high school, college.
Wow.
And then so like I was always, that's all I wanted to do was play drums in a band, tour, record, like live that lifestyle. And then as I started to understand what that lifestyle was and like kind of be more exposed to it, then I was like, all right, is that really the path I want to go down? But yeah, I was so in middle school I played in like a pop punk band, and then high school I played in it was like a post-hardcore, so like I'd say a little more punk and a little more like heavy. And then in college I played in a couple of bands in college, but the one that I really like pursued, they were called the Crazy Carls, and it was a pop reggae band. And so I got endorsed by CNC Drums, so I was like 20 years old and had a completely custom drum set I was able to order, design, and so that was super cool. Still have that drum set set up, and it's kind of like that's my prized possession that I'll never get rid of.
Wow.
And so then we were touring, we were recording in that band, and played with some pretty big acts. And so my claim to fame in that band was the Dirty Heads. So they opened up at a show that we played for us.
No way.
Yeah.
I've seen Dirty Heads like 5 times now.
So I want to say it was like Dirty Heads, us, and then Collie Buds. But like someone on that level, like Soja. It was one of those two. And and I remember that. And then like 6 months later, they blew up. And but anyways, so in that band, there came a fork in the road, and the lead singer was a year older. So he was like, hey, I'm graduating college. I'm moving to California. You guys can come with me or let me know what you want to do. So I decided to graduate college and not go out to California with him. So that was kind of like the end of me pursuing any musical career.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and during that college period, it was somewhat, I guess, non-traditional in the fact that you went to 3 to 4 different colleges over a span of 6 years. Was part of that because of the bands you're playing with, or tell us about maybe some of the advantages, disadvantages of,
Yeah. So out of high school, so I went to Stanton, and then I went to Florida State, and I was doing engineering. So Florida State shares their engineering school with FAMU, and I was like, all right, I was living on campus at Florida State, and then all my classes I had to hop on a bus and go to the FAMU campus to take my classes, and I was like, I can't do this for 4 more years. So I was there for a semester, transferred to UCF because I had a bunch of friends there. I was at UCF, got my AA, so I was there for 2 years and loved it. Like I said, I had a lot of friends there. That's where the band that I played in was started, in Orlando, and I think it was a good place to start a band, just because there was a ton of opportunities in the music industry, like plenty of places to record, lots of places to play at, lots of people that could pick you up and book you at different venues around the state. So like we did one, what's his name? The guy from NSYNC, the crazy guy, I think it's like Chris something. But we played a showcase where he was a judge, and that's one of the memories I have. But anyways, so I was at UCF, and then after that, I decided to apply to Florida, and then I got into Florida, and this is when I was like, all right, I'm still gonna pursue engineering. So I was at Florida. I was there 2006, 2007, or it was like 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. And I was there for 2 years, and then that's when I was really getting interested in the apparel industry, and like I've always been around it growing up. Just my grandparents did it in Peru. So after being at Florida for 2 years, I was like, I don't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life, but I'm 4 years into this degree. I'm not going to just give up or change my major or like leave or whatever. But so then I transferred to UNF and started a business, and then graduated from engineering.
Yeah, that kind of leads me right into my next question about Strata, really the inception of Strata. So tell us a little bit more about how you started that up, where you got the name, really just all the details of what that was like getting off the ground right after school.
Yeah, so I would say, like I was saying, my brother and I would go to Peru every summer. My mom would send us there for the summers, and my grandparents, they did clothing manufacturing in Peru. And so they did the clothing manufacturing, and then the way they distributed it was they opened retail stores, but they would sell all the apparel wholesale. So people from other smaller provinces would come to their city and then buy the stuff wholesale and then take it back to their provinces and then sell it in their stores. So so we kind of just always grew up around it and kind of knew it, and were exposed to it pretty early on. So in high school, I remember I tried sewing up my first shirt, and just because I was interested in it, and I asked my parents to get me a sewing machine. I took a polo, cut it all off, and then try to resew it. And then after that, I started learning like different stitches on the sewing machine. So then I just put these random stitches throughout all the apparel, and then I would wear that out. So that's kind of where it started in high school, is when I was like, all right. And then I was really into like denim. So there was a lot of different cuts, different fabrics, different washes. What might happen if you wash one certain type of fabric one way or wash it a different way. So and then distressing, and there was a lot of stuff that interested me about denim. So. And that was all in high school. And then, like I said, in college, I was still on the music path. So that was really where my main focus
kind of backseated the clothing stuff.
Right. It backseated the clothing. I was always interested in it, but it was never like front of mind. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved from Gainesville back to Jacksonville, that's when I was like, I really want to, because like I was saying, I was 1 year younger than the lead singer. So like that 1 year, he was moving out to California, and I was like, all right, well, now I'm not going to pursue music. What am I going to pursue? Because I know I don't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. So then that's when I was like, you know what? I really enjoy apparel. So I'm going to move back to Jacksonville and really dial in my knowledge on apparel. So moved back, bought a flight with my brother to Peru, and we kind of just landed in Peru, and we're like, all right, we're going to figure this out. And then first place we went was this place called Gamara, and it's like worse. It's probably the worst neighborhood in the capital, but that's where there's a lot of fabric stores, there's a lot of sewers there. So we kind of just went there, having no idea what we were getting into, and then we just started talking to people. We met people, and then met companies that provided fabric, met companies that provided sewing, and just started to learn it from there. And then that's when my brother and I were like, all right, let's place an order for some, I think it was like, I want to say like 300 or 400 tees, and let's just see what happens. So that was in, I want to say like 2010. To 2010 is kind of when I was like, all right, let's do this. And at that time, while I was graduating that last year, I was kind of getting our ducks in a row, like learning everything. I knew I was about to graduate, but I couldn't make a living from this brand. And so then I was like, all right, what am I going to do for a job right out of college? And so I decided to apply at Wells Fargo for an internship that they had. And it was like, I can't remember how many people applied, but they chose 7 people out of the U.S., out of the whole U.S. They chose 7 people, and I was one of them for this internship, and they were going to teach you how to be a mortgage broker. So I did an internship with Wells Fargo, and then they decided to give me a job afterwards, after that internship, and I liked it because I was like, all right, I didn't learn any of finance or business in school, so now I can learn it not in school, like in real life, and I can also, it was a commission-only job, so it wasn't like I had to punch a clock, so then I could also work on the brand when I wasn't working on doing mortgages.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I decided to do.
And really smart too. I mean, especially for a lot of young people to hear that, where you have an idea of what you're passionate about, but then you're also realistic about, okay, I need to have something like kind of a quote unquote day job that's going to help pay the bills. And not only that, but also learn from it, get great experience. But tell us, I'm curious, okay, so you go to Peru and you buy your first order of t-shirts, but tell us about those first 3 to 6 months. Like, what was the first product? What do you print on the t-shirts? And then who are you selling them to? Like,
yeah. So, I mean, you're making me go back in time, like kind of really remember what that was like. Cause at that time I was living, across from the Mellow Mushroom in Jax Beach. And, it was and that was strategic because Mellow Mushroom was having a ton of events at that time. So like, anyways, I'll get to there, but, so the first order, this is what happened. And this is just learning. But placed an order, got the tees here, washed the tees, they shrunk like half. And then we learned that there was different types of fabric. There was fabric that had been treated and untreated fabric. Untreated fabric it's not pre-washed. It doesn't have any enzymes in it to keep the color in it. Like we learned a lot. So what we did, because we had a problem solve, is we're like, all right, well, let's just wash the whole lot and then sell them as kids shirts. So then that's kind of what we did with that. And then we started to learn more and more. All right, we got to buy reactive fabric, and we got to make sure that it's pre-shrunk and all these things. But like I mentioned, we were living in an apartment off, I think it was 3rd and 10th across from the Mellow Mushroom, and we were starting to get shipments in, and our apartment kind of became like our retail and warehouse. So like I vividly remember these couple of pictures I have, but there's like DHL boxes showing up, and then us opening them, and then our whole apartment is like all these just tees and denim, and then our closets are our warehouse. So like we had all the tees in one closet, all the denim in another closet, like all the swim in another closet, and then people would come over and they would shop the closets. So and then what we would do is we do lots of trade shows. So like we would go to Surf Expo, and we'd do Surf Expo. And then when we first started, because of the age, so I was like, I want to say 22, somewhere in there. So like surf and skate was really what my life was about. So, and that's part of the reason I was living on 10th and 3rd is because I was so close to the ocean. But so that was our market. So then we would go to events like Surf Expo. We would go to retailers like local surf shops and local skate shops. And that's who we first started going after to carry our brand. And then over time, we would continue going to these surf expos, and then continue building a client base and retailers. And then there came a point where we outgrew that apartment, and we were like, all right, we got to get something a little bit bigger, but we also don't have a ton of cash. So I found a warehouse in Mayport for $1,000 a month. It was 3,500 square feet for $1,000 a month, and it was a little old lady, and her husband had passed away, and he kind of managed all the real estate that they had, and she was like, just give me $1,000 a month, and you guys can stay here however long you want. So then we moved in there, and we started throwing parties. So because again, we're bootstrapped, like don't have a ton of capital. We're trying to be creative with Damon John from Fubu. He wrote a book. I can't remember what the name of it is called, but it's basically, it talks about how if you start a brand bootstrapped, you're going to be much more creative and there's going to be a lot more opportunities than if you were to start a brand with a ton of capital to go out and start, because you're being super creative on how you're spending that little bit of money you do have. Mm-hmm. So we move into this warehouse, and then we're like, all right, we need to do marketing. So we started throwing parties at the warehouse and charging entry. So we would there was one party we had, T-Pain showed up. So
no way.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But they started to become like a thing. And
you said that so casually, like T-Pain show. How'd you get him to go? Was it just kind of a random thing?
I have no idea, because like my background in the music industry, we would get acts to come through, and then we would get people like Sweetwater would sponsor beer, and then Void, who's now Ink Factory Brewing, mm-hmm. they would do events with us. And
yeah, not to interrupt you. So I remember, I met Jerry about a year ago, but I remember telling you when we first met, like, I used to get the Strata clothing all the time at surf contest, at Pipeline Surf Shop, all this stuff. Yeah. And that was going to be my next question I was going to ask you, as you're kind of like dabbling in it now, like those modern tactics to growing the brand, like, do you feel like that's what fueled it from the get-go, was like the social media, the collaborations, the parties?
So in the beginning, because this was like 2010, and so there wasn't a ton of social media, but I do remember we really pushed stuff on Facebook, and we would do their event stuff. Like, now Facebook's gotten so like cookie cutter. Before, it was just kind of like a free for all, like send out a like request and then everyone liked it. Whereas now it's like you get a like request every minute, mm-hmm. For like a new business or a new brand. And so it was much different back then. But the parties, the reason we did them the way we did was because we would get the marketing value from it, and then we would also, since we were charging entry, we would also be making money. So then we would turn around, and with that marketing value, we'd take that money and go make productions and then sell it to the people we were just marketing to. So that's kind of, it was like a circle. Mm. And so that helped us out. And then we started going, and we got to the point to where we were carried in Buckle and PacSun, and then there was Karmaloop online, and then there was some off-brand retailers, some retailers in Canada, retailer in Australia, Peru, and then so this was like 5 years into it. We got a partner in Peru, and he started opening stores in Peru with the brand. So that really helped us out with credibility, and also we were able to piggyback off both of our productions, so that helped with our costs. But that's kind of where we were really starting to fuel the brand. And then as we got older, we started the manufacturing side of it.
Yeah, so tell us about how you figured out that tipping point of when you needed to look to get into your own manufacturing of your own product.
And so that's a great question. So basically, when we started looking for our own factories, looking for our own sewers, our own manufacturing locations. And then, so it was always in the back of our head that it's like, we're going to have to do our own manufacturing, because usually, and especially nowadays, it's you go find either a broker or a manufacturer that you can just take designs to, and then they take care of the rest. And for us, we were taking our designs straight to the source. So, and like choosing fabrics, choosing threads, choosing cuts, stuff like making patterns. So then, since we did all that legwork in the beginning, after a few years, we realized that people were coming to us to help them start a brand, or other businesses were saying, hey, I want to do something a little more creative. Can you guys help me do that? And then that's when we realized, we're like, well, that's also another business, and then that's when we started a separate entity from the apparel, and the apparel would buy its clothes from. I'm sorry, the brand would buy its apparel from the manufacturing business, and the manufacturing business would manufacture for Strata and other brands and other businesses, and then that was kind of like when we started that, it was almost like immediate revenue. So it was almost like, because we had the credibility with the brand, and people were just like, we want to work with you guys.
Yeah. And would you say, because one thing I've picked up is like, you talked about all the different washes and having a passion for denim, sewing your own shirt. Would you say that's been one of your favorite parts about the whole business, is just being able to be creative and kind of bring things to life for other people?
Yeah. And like, so I think my mind is, I feel like a lot of people have like, they're either super creative or they're super analytical. And I feel like I'm a little bit of both. And because I enjoy being creative, but I also look at the analytical side of it.
That engineering part of you, right?
Yeah.
It does come into
I
play.
think that because originally I wanted to be an architect, but I really enjoyed math. So then that's why I decided to go to school for engineering, because you can still be creative and there's a lot of analytical components to it. So that's kind of why I decided with engineering. So when we started the brand, I was able to be creative, and I also leaned on other creatives, because I knew, like, all right, what I might like or what I might be creating might not necessarily mean that other people are going to want it or other people are going to want to buy it. But what I realized from that is when I leaned on other creatives, I knew, or I felt like I knew that, all right, someone's probably going to buy this, or like, no, let's go in a different direction, because I'm not really a fan of that. So, and it wasn't necessarily catering to me, but I was always like, all right, if it can't be too out there, because then it's going to be very, very niche, but it also it's got to be a good medium. Yeah. So
I'm curious too, like, one of the challenges, it seems like, of being in, apparel when your target market is, surfers, skateboarders, kind of that younger crowd, is like, you really have to stay ahead of trends, because you don't know what's selling today is not necessarily, you can't project that's going to be selling 5 years from now. So can you tell us, like, what were some of the things that you did from a sales standpoint to kind of stay out in front of those trends, like whether it was doing, getting in more shops, different types of shops, doing more online or social media, or I'm sure at some point probably, paying affiliates to wear. So tell us some about it.
Yeah, so for us, it was more on like what the actual apparel was made from. So we always went with Pima cotton, which is super high quality cotton, and it's called 40-1. So it's 40 single apparel, and normal tees are like 20, or nice tees are 30. And we always went with 40. So they were super, super thin and super breathable. And then the prints we would always use water-based and discharge on those prints. And then the denim, so we were using Brazilian denim and then cutting and sewing it in Peru. So it wasn't like Italian denim or Japanese denim where it's like super nice, but it was still very nice quality denim. So we were always focused on the feel of all the products, and so with that, I feel like we were always able to stay with the trends, because I mean, quality is always going to be a trend.
Yeah. No, I remember even the shirts that I still have to this day. I mean, I love wearing them weekly. They're like, my go-to shirts, my old Strat shirts that I still have.
I know, like when I saw you at the Jag game.
Yeah. No, that is the only, I don't even have like a Jaguar shirt, but it's like, the tealish color with the black. That's my go-to on any Sunday for sure.
And that's one of the things we try to do differently at that time, because there was, so the normal trajectory when you start a brand is, all right, you come out with some t-shirts, come out with some headwear, and then find someone that can come out with something other than t-shirts and hats. But when we released, we released like full lines. So we had woven shirts, we had flannel shirts, we had swimwear, denim jackets and denim bottoms. So like it wasn't, we were like all in.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like okay, let's just dabble in some t-shirts and see where it goes.
Yeah. So my next question, you kind of mentioned it there briefly for a second, is the cut and sew operation you guys had in Peru. So I know you had a warehouse there. You ended up moving into a pretty massive warehouse in downtown Jacksonville too. This is also kind of your first introduction to real estate. Tell us a little bit more about getting those larger warehouses, the process of it, if even, you know, just what that meant for you guys as a company as you started to expand.
Okay. So yeah, this was like 2000. So 2010, we started the brand. I was working at Wells Fargo into 2010, early 2011, and then 2004. So we moved into a warehouse in Mayport. I want to say this was like 2012, somewhere around there. So I was still working at Wells Fargo when we moved into our first warehouse in Mayport.
The party stop.
The party stop. And then that's kind of when I first started getting, so I learned a lot about the real estate market and industry at Wells Fargo since I was doing mortgages there, and signing a commercial lease at the age of like 23, 24, somewhere around there. So that also taught me about real estate. So we were in that original location in Mayport, and then we were like, all right, we're starting to grow. We should really start looking for another place. And everyone we worked with, anything we had ever known was Jax Beach, Atlantic Beach, Mayport. Like, we looked at all locations over there, and they were all just out of our price range for what we wanted, because we wanted a big space and a space we could continue to grow in. And it just felt like it was, and this was, 8 years ago? So now I can't imagine what that space is like as far as price-wise. But we were like, all right, well, we can't afford anything at the beach. So, and at this, we were looking at leasing and buying. So, and I didn't know how we were going to buy a spot, but we were looking at both types of places. So then the only other place I wanted to be was downtown Jacksonville, because I was like, all right, if we can't be at the beach, I don't want to be in a warehouse off Phillips or Kernan or just a random place in Jacksonville. Like, I really wanted to be somewhere that
kind of like a hub.
Yeah. Well, a place where we could essentially be like, all right, we're going to establish ourselves here. And in the beginning we thought it would be the beach, but then, so I was like, all right, let's go look downtown. And I remember, again, this is me with like little experience in real estate at all. And I put a contract to buy a warehouse in Springfield, and it was like 14,000 square feet, $350,000, and it needed a full renovation. And I was like, we can do it. So, and I put $3,000 down, and I won't ever forget that, because then I was like, so then everyone was all stoked, and we were like, all right, sweet, this is going to be our new headquarters. And so we started cleaning it out, like, and this is still during the contract period, because I think it was like 90 days. So we started cleaning it out. We started building some walls, kind of like imagining the whole warehouse. And then I don't know what it was, but we were like, we can't move in here. And we decided this isn't the spot for us. And so we backed out of that contract. I lost the $3,000, and I was like, all right, now where are we gonna look? And then I remember I would drive around after 5 till like 10 o'clock at night through Springfield, through downtown, through Riverside, through just random neighborhoods, just looking for warehouses. And then I found a sign out front of the warehouse that we're at now, and I looked it up. Yeah, and I remember the exact time I found it, because it was at night, and I was like, this looks like a pretty big warehouse. It was right next to the stadium, and I was like, dang, this is probably going to sell super quick. So I looked it up, and it had been sitting for a while. It was over a year that it had been sitting, And I was like, all right, this could go somewhere. And then, but the only thing is it was listed at double what we had just put a contract on. So I was like, I don't know how we're going to be able to afford this or move into it. So then luckily, because it had been sitting for so long, the original owner was willing to hold the note at a super low mortgage rate. And so then we put an offer on it. They accepted it. We were able to, after inspections, we were able to bring the price down considerably. So then that helped a lot. But that was kind of the start of us really creating our own place. And then kind of me learning more and more about the real estate industry and the commercial side of things. So then that was 2016 when we bought that place. And like I was telling you guys earlier, there was a lot of creative financing we had to do to get in there. But we got in there, and then we were able to grow, and over time kind of start expanding. So I'm pretty happy because that was a leap of faith, and I was like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get in this building and to make sure this works. And so I had to be creative, and like that book that Damon John wrote is like when you're strapped, you look at creative ways to make it work and make it happen.
Exactly. Well, and I think too, it's you talked about, having that right brain, left brain, like the creative side and the engineering. Luckily, you didn't let the engineering side take over of
the numbers don't work on this.
Right. And I mean, we've been to that warehouse. It's phenomenal. 2.5 acres, probably not even a quarter mile from the stadium.
It's
a few hundred feet even.
One block.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super impressive setup. And so I wanted to ask you too, so really in the midst of all of this, right? So you meet Marianne, or you and Marianne get married, and you have Gray in 2013. So tell us about kind of managing all of that while,
I completely forgot about my personal life during that time. I was just talking about like what was going on. And so Marianne and I met in like 2011, somewhere around there. And so she had moved to Jacksonville for Teach for America, and she grew up in Indiana and then went to DePaul, decided to apply for Teach for America, and then she got placed in Jacksonville. And then I had just graduated and moved into 11 East. That's where she moved in 11 East downtown and that was another thing too, is so when we were looking for a warehouse space, I was living downtown. I was super invested in downtown. I wanted to see downtown grow. Jacksonville is just, it's got a really special place in my heart. And so I wanted to be part of downtown Jacksonville, like coming up and really starting to make a difference. But so we were both living in 11 East downtown, and I was on the 15th floor coming down, and she gets on the 3rd floor. And so we're both in the elevator, and I was like, I got to talk to this girl. And but I didn't know what to talk to her about, so they were doing construction on her floor. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to ask her if this is HUD housing. And I was like, hey, is this HUD housing? And she was like, no, absolutely not. But and then I was like, oh, my bad. And I just introduced myself. So, but I didn't want to be too creepy and ask for her number like right away. So I was like, if I see her again, then I'll ask her for her number. And then so a week later, she dyes her hair, like looks like a completely different person, and I didn't know it was her. And I was trying to holler at her with my friend, and then like trying to get her attention. And then that same day that I was trying to get her attention, I get a random text. She had met my brother, and my brother was like, oh, you should hang out with Jerry. He lives in that building. So I get a random text. I'm like, I don't know who it is at this point because it's a random text. And I'm like, yeah, sure, come on up. I'm hanging out with friends. And she comes up, and it's the girl that I was trying to get her attention earlier that day, and I was like, all right, this is meant to be. So that was 2011, and then I was working at Wells Fargo at that time. So graduated college already, working at Wells Fargo, and then we had Gray in 2013, and then moved to Springfield. So we were living in Springfield, and in 2014, that's when I decided to leave Wells Fargo and pursue Strata 100%. She left her teaching job and decided to take her real estate. So I guess because of the amount of time we were together, and the like what she learned while I was doing real estate, maybe it interested her. I'm not sure why she wanted to get into real estate, but essentially, as soon as I got out of doing mortgages, she got into real estate. So we had a newborn. We both quit our jobs and just decided to, and we had just bought a house together. So and this was into 2013, beginning of 2014, somewhere around there. And so we were just like, we're going to make it happen. And because she knew, she was very passionate about teaching, but she felt that the difference she was trying to make was just very minimal in the big difference that needed to happen. So that's why she was like, I can't do teaching forever. And then for me, there came a point. So when I was doing mortgages at Wells Fargo, I was killing it. So because I was super ambitious, I was young, and I was closing more mortgages than my mentor. So double the amount of mortgages monthly. So then Wells Fargo was stoked. So they were flying me out to Baltimore and Texas and California, all these different places to go tell other people how I was successful, and just from learning it as an intern and then going and doing it. So that was cool. But then I had one bad month, and they put me on this performance improvement plan. And I was like, that's when I got the first taste of corporate and what it's like. And I was like, all right, this isn't for me. So I put my 2 weeks in the next day. Wow. Yeah. And then that's when I was like, all right, I'm just going to go full steam ahead on Strata and do this. And like I said, I had it was whether I decided to continue pursuing that corporate ladder and staying with Wells Fargo, and maybe, all right, I don't start a business or don't pursue apparel and kind of stay with being comfortable. But I was like, this is the only shot I'm going to get to really go and do it. So.
Yeah, and kind of bringing it back into the last couple years, I mean, Strata has seen huge growth as a brand, as manufacturing, making the Inc. 5000 list one year. But you've actually now decided to step away. Kind of tell us a little bit more about that decision, what the whole time period at Strata is meant to you, but really what over the last year or so has happened and kind of what's coming next for you.
Yeah. So, we first made the Inc. 5000 in 2017, and then again in 2022 or 2020. No, COVID 2020. So that was cool to be on the Inc. 5000 twice. But essentially in the last year, so when we started the brand, I was 23. My brother was early 20s, so I was 22, somewhere around there. He was 19, 20. And so I was always kind of the direction, the leader, it was always almost like, this is the path we're going to take, or this is the direction we're going to go in. So then as we've gotten older, my brother wanted to go in one direction. He's super high fashion, super different marketing angles and strategies, and then I'm more of like mass market, like market in a way that appeals to, I'd say, like a certain consumer or more consumers as opposed to like super niche market. So then we were just starting to see things differently, and then our business manager who runs our finances and does like all of our financial stuff, he was like, hey, I'm going to suggest that you guys, Jason, why don't you run the brand, and then Jerry, you can run the manufacturing side, and then see where that goes. And then it kind of just made sense for both of us because that's what he was really passionate about and really wanted to take the direction of the brand and take it in one way. And I was always concentrated on building the manufacturing and making sure we were profitable on the manufacturing side, just because that's how my mind thinks, is like analytical. So then this is about a year and a half ago, he moved the brand to Miami. So their headquarters are now in Miami, and then he moved out to LA. So he's living in LA, and I think he has a showroom over there now. So he just took over the brand 100%. So it's online, and it's carried in retailers, and now the direction of it is music inspired and elevated essentials. So like sells sunglasses, wovens, really nice tees. I'd say a lot more niche and very concentrated. So, and then what I've been doing is manufacturing and concentrating on the manufacturing side, and then really just growing that, and then also concentrating on the real estate. Because so what we were doing after we moved to Talleyrand, which is where the warehouse is, our neighbors were kind of just like, they were older, and they would just knock on our door and say, hey, you're our neighbors, do you want to buy our property? And we're like, sure. So we were able to assemble 2.5 acres, 40,000 square feet, right next to the Jaguar Stadium, and so it's that's pretty exciting for me. So essentially, that's really where I've been concentrating a lot of my time, is commercial real estate, and then also growing the manufacturing side of the business. And then in turn, I've had to rebrand. So I rebranded as MFG Merch. And so we do merchandise manufacturing, and right now we manufacture for other brands, businesses, and music industry. So in the last, I'd say, few months, I've started to kind of ping my creative designer and start coming up with new brand concepts for starting another brand. So right now it's all in the early stages, but I've got like a list, and every time I think of one, I buy the domain, get the handles, everything, because I might not be doing it necessarily right that second, but it could be something that I can pursue later down the road. And but that's like the creative side of myself. Yeah. is always thinking of other brands and like what's available, what trademarks, and that's one thing I can look up a trademark probably in like 2 minutes. And know if it's trademarked or not. So that's the first thing I do when I think of a new brand idea, is I look up the domain name, the handles, and the trademark. Yeah. So
it's really smart. Well, and the thing is too, is that even if you don't use it, the fact that you thought of it, there's a good chance somebody is probably going to think of it at some point as well.
Right. And that's why I just go ahead and get it.
Yeah.
And then figure it out later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm concentrating some of my time right now is, so 2 things that we're currently working on. One is I really want to start a swim brand. So because I have a really good factory that I have a great rapport with and a great relationship with that does really good swim for really big brands. And so I've got that connection, and I have a few ideas for that brand. And then the other brand is a blank brand. So it's like just really good quality blanks. So like this tea. Mm-hmm. So like we made this tea but it's a gradient. So this had one color going into another color to the bottom. So, because I feel like if you have a good quality product, then the brand is gonna follow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very interesting. Super excited to see what you come up with. So I wanted to ask you too. I know you're obviously very involved in commercial real estate. You've got the 2.5 acre parcel, which I think you just got a tenant on one of them. And what's really neat about where you are too is being that close to the stadium. There's so many projects that are up and coming, so it's only going to continue to increase in value. But so you can talk about that, but also maybe how are you still looking for properties, commercial properties?
Yeah.
And then how do you determine what you want to look to buy or invest in?
Yeah. So that's because we bought our first property, commercial property, being with creative financing. That's how I've always tried to approach every deal first is, can I creatively purchase this? And if I can't, I can't. But and I can find a different way to purchase it. But like right now, so the property you were just talking about, the Jaguars just moved in 6 months ago, and they are doing the Four Seasons build across from the stadium. So they're going to be building a Four Seasons model in that warehouse, and then they're going to use it as their construction offices. So that's right next door to us. So it's cool to be able to be a part of that development over there. And then as far as the creative, like looking for other properties and going about it. So really I've just kind of put myself out there as like, okay, Jerry, if there's a property that you need to get rid of or you don't know what to do with, like, call Jerry. So like everyone that knows me is most likely knows that Jerry will go take a look at it. And so that's kind of how I've tried to position myself, and it's worked. Like my neighbor, he was like, hey, I want to introduce you to this minister. He has a warehouse and he wants to get rid of it, but it needs some work. So and that's another thing too, is the stuff I look for might not be very pretty.
Right.
So and I'm able to see a vision for it when it's done, but other people might just see it and be like, no, there's no way I'm touching that.
It's almost like your we buy ugly warehouses. Right?
Yeah. So the deal I'm working on right now is supposed to close in 30 days, but that one, the minister was going to give the warehouse away to a guy in Haiti, and my neighbor was like, wait, don't give it away, talk to Jerry. So on that one, we're giving him a down payment, and then he's going to hold the note for 15 years, and he's stoked because he thought he couldn't get anything for it, and he was going to give it away to a random guy. Well, it wasn't a random guy, but some guy in another country. So so it's a win-win for both of us.
So when you're thinking back to, all the things now, from entrepreneurship to, and obviously real estate, you entrepreneur in the same way, what's some advice you would give your younger self, or maybe even Gray one day when it's his time to get into this stuff? What would you say is something now that you wish you knew when you started out?
I would say, so definitely don't be scared to do what you're passionate about, because I'm a firm believer that if you do what you are passionate about and you pursue what you want to do, that the money will come. And a lot of people might look at it as like, okay, I need to make X amount to be able to go down that path. And like if you're always looking at it that way, then I don't feel like you're able to look at it creatively at all. So that's some advice. And then I would say my younger self, I would probably say, sorry, someone's calling me. Everyone's calling me. I've probably got like 7 calls of it too.
Someone's got an ugly warehouse they're trying to sell.
But yeah, so some additional advice I would give my younger self is don't be scared to take risks. And I have it tattooed on myself too. We were at a trade show in Vegas, and I can't remember what hotel it was in, but it was in the bathroom. And in the bathroom, it said, "To win without risk is the triumph without glory." So that's kind of, so I got it tattooed on myself because I was like, I always want to remember that it's you have to take that risk to be able to triumph.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to mention one thing too that I've, noticed trending throughout what you're talking about is you've done a really good job of trusting your gut along the way, whether you guys were in that warehouse and that you initially walked out on your $3,000 deposit, that decision to leave Wells Fargo, even though you were killing it, of like, you see that sign. So anything related to that in terms of like trusting your gut along the way that you think helps you do that?
So I would say I look at my life as forks in the road. So it's like in college, I had a fork in the road, what school to go to. When I was in a band, I had a fork in the road, whether I moved to California or graduate college. At Wells Fargo, I had a fork in the road, whether it was stay at Wells Fargo or pursue a business venture. I feel like it's always been forks in the road, and you can't necessarily make a calculated decision and know how that outcome is going to go. So for me, it's a little bit of like, and I'm like, I have friends that tell me this is a full send mentality. So it's like, and I don't know what it is inside me, but it's like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it and put everything I got into it. And then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least I know that I put everything I got into it and that I tried as best I could. And going forward with that mentality, I feel like has been what's helped me like go down those paths and succeed going down those paths.
Yeah, I think it's definitely for everyone listening and watching this now is a huge takeaway of just like the regret, that can come with maybe taking the path less or the path more traveled that's safer, things like that. I know that's one of the things that someone said to me recently. It's like, it's not that like your parents are trying to keep you from pursuing your dreams. It's not that like these people are trying to like hinder your ability to go do that. It's just that they want you to be safe. They want you, like, it takes a lot of risk to do these sort of things. So it's been really cool to kind of pick your brain and talk about everything you've been able to do with Strata, now moving into real estate, raising your kids. Just have one last question for you. As you know, our Brian's really built grit.org on 12 principles, which is the grit creed. We recite them every day. Gray would probably be able to say them to you when you get home later today. So you have them right there in front of you. What part of the grit creed resonates most with you and why?
Yeah, so I've watched. So Gray is a part of the camp every year. So and you guys filmed a video of him reciting it. So that meant a lot to me because I feel like the grit creed is exactly how I want him to live his life and every part about it. But there was one that resonates with me really quite a bit. Let me find it right here. So because I live my life like this and I run my business like this and Gray I feel like is developing this trait, but I will never ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do. So that's always resonated with me and like I said, that's kind of how I run my business because like when we're super busy, I mean there's times where we're in there 15-hour days and on the manufacturing side and for weeks at a time. And but I'm right there with them. It's not like, all right, guys, I'll see you later, and but I need you guys to work 15-hour days this week, So it's like that's how I run my business. Is like I'm not going to ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do. Or like in our early stages of the brand, we were having to drive to Miami to pick up all our shipments because they were all coming in freight and air freight, and then we were just learning the business. So my brother and I would take turns driving down to Miami and back in the same day and just to pick up these shipments. So like I feel like it really taught me that it's hard work to start a business and don't ask someone to do something you're not willing to do.
Yeah, I love that. I've got one question, then Colby, you can take us home. But, one thing that I really, admire and respect about you, Jerry, is, I'll see you, early at the YMCH days. So I know you've got, a great workout routine, but also just the fact you're very intentional about just time with family. You guys take family trips. I know you and Gray do your father-son ski trip to Park City. So, tell us about that piece in terms of just kind of, obviously you've got so much professionally on your plate, but then taking that time personally and then also for yourself with the physical working out, like, because that's a big part of one of the things that we obviously promote is kind of that mental, physical, emotional, all encompassing. So anything on that you feel like has helped you or why that's important to you personally?
Yeah. So when I was younger, someone told me that there was like, you can't do everything you want to do. So you want to be purposeful with what you're doing. So fitness is really big for me because I want to live as long as I can. So I'm in the Y every day if I can be there, but I just want to get a good sweat in, and I want to get my heart rate up, and I just want to make sure I'm active and I eat healthy and stuff like that. So fitness is a really big one for me. And then family. So I've kind of, and this has gotten different as I've gotten older, is when I was younger, no kids, I was like working long hours and working super hard. But now as I've gotten older, I've learned that there's going to be a time when my kids don't want to hang out with me. So I'm going to enjoy the time when they do want to hang out with me, which is right now. So like if Gray's like, hey, I want to go to the park, or hey, I want to take a quick trip. And it's not every trip, but it's like I want to, and we take surf trips, we take snowboard trips, we take like sightseeing trips. It's just time we spend together, but I've tried to be intentional with the activities I do with our family because I enjoy doing them, our family enjoys doing them, and then it's just creating more of a bond with my kids. So that's been really important to me, is that hang out with my kids now while they want to hang out with me, as opposed to when they're 16 and they want to go hang out with their 16-year-old friends and drive a car and do hood rat things.
Yeah. You know a thing or two about that these days.
Yeah, is that what it's like?
Getting there. Not yet, but he's studying. He just failed his learner's permit test last night, but he's working on it. He's going to keep going.
He was just swearing up and down how he was ready to take this test. I was like, oh, let him take the test. He's like, yeah, I'm ready for it. Like, I'll take it. It's funny. He bombed it.
It's funny.
Well, yeah, it's really good to hear all this from you, Jerry. Again, like, you know, they say success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And
yeah.
I think hearing it from you that, you know, you've gotten so much out of the creative side and the pursuit of doing these things, but again, it kind of comes back to, like, you know, spending time with your family, and plus, you know, obviously, like, that's what's made all of this possible. It's like your continuous efforts in the workplace and in your businesses.
Right.
So again, just thank you for being here today. We really, really appreciate having you on, taking the time to be here. Your Apple Watch has been blowing up. So we know you got places to be, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. So thank you again, Jerry. Yeah. That's a wrap here today at the Grit.org podcast. Please check out our other episodes. Leave us a comment. Tell us something you enjoyed about Jerry's story. Share this with someone you think it would resonate with or impact. As always, we appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Grit.org podcast.